Welcome to the latest episode of Wealth Uncensored. You think you're doing your heirs a favor by leaving them a bunch of money. Maybe not. Have you ever thought about the burden that you're placing on your heirs by leaving them a bunch of money outright? Most people mistakenly think that a will is sufficient to transfer great wealth to the next generation. This is a huge mistake. So, first of all, if you own assets in a bunch of countries in your own name, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing your heirs a disservice. During your lifetime, if you own all these assets in your own name, Welcome to the Wealth Uncensored podcast. Straight talk about everything that impacts your wealth. In each episode, I share what I've learned through my own experience and 2 decades of helping high net worth clients structure their affairs to minimize taxes and protect their assets for the next generation. I'll also feature special guests who are experts in their own field, sharing their knowledge and experience to help you protect what's yours. I'm your host, Jimmy Sexton. Let's dive into today's show. They're all at risk if you get sued or divorced. You have a very rudimentary estate plan that essentially says, when I die, leave my assets to these people. Now, how does that happen, leaving your assets to these people? When you die, the assets are all in your name. Somehow, these assets need to get moved into the name of your heirs. The way that's done is through a process called probate. Your heirs, who are already upset you're dead, maybe not, depends how you lived your life, but they then take this will, they go to court, the court opens a probate process, and essentially, in this probate process, opens the estate, pays any debts you have, and then divvies the assets up according to your will to the heirs. This process can a lot of times take over a year to complete, during which time your heirs might not even have access to the assets. And a lot of times the lawyers and court and other fees necessary to accomplish this can be in excess of 10% of the value of the estate. You probably need to go through this process in every country in which you have assets. If you're a high net multinational individual who dies and all you have is a will and you have assets, vacation homes, primary residences, companies, investments, planes, boats, whatever it is, in different countries, there's a possibility that your heirs are going to have to go through probate in several different countries. Let's play this out. During your lifetime, you own the assets in your name. You have a will leaving it to your heir. Like I said, if your assets are in your name, you lack privacy, you don't have any asset protection, you have a rudimentary estate plan in the form of a will. Now let's talk about how you're really not doing your heirs much of a favor leaving them a great amount of money. Because that's what most people think. Most people think, oh, I'm rich, I have a bunch of money, I'm going to leave it to my heirs, and they're just going to be stoked to get this money. And they don't think about the burden that this actually places on the heirs. Let's play this through. You have your assets in your name, you have a will, you die. Now, 1, your heirs are upset. 2, in order to be able to get your assets, they have to go through the probate process, during which they might not even have access to the assets while it's going through probate. The probate process is going to take a long time. They're going to have to deal with lawyers and courts and all this stuff in order to get the assets ultimately put into their name. It's going to cost a lot of money. There's potentially going to be inheritance taxes or estate taxes, and then they get the money. So first of all, they're already upset you're dead, hopefully. Then they have to fight for maybe more than a year with lawyers and everybody else to actually get the assets in their name. They have to pay all the probate costs. They have to pay the estate or inheritance tax just in order to get the money. That in and of itself is a time and cost burden. Now they have this great wealth. This might be great. Your heir inherits a net of $10 million. Sure, they're thrilled. They have $10 million. But what does this actually do to their life? 1, in most countries, tax their residents on worldwide income. That means that all the income that this $10 million earns is going to be subject to income tax. Now they're paying tax in addition to whatever income they earn. Now they're paying tax on all the income generated by this $10 million, which is most likely going to put them in the highest tax bracket in whatever country that is. If that country has wealth taxes, that $10 million is going to be subject to wealth tax. If they die, that $10 million is going to be part of their estate and is going to most likely be subject to estate or inheritance taxes if that country has estate or inheritance taxes. Then there's the risk of losing that money. In case of a lawsuit or a divorce, it's not protected. Also, if they own that wealth in their own name, they don't have any privacy, it's going to open them up Everybody's going to come to them with a great business idea. All their friends are going to want them to invest in something. Maybe even family members are going to want to invest in something. They're at an increased risk of fraud. Depending on where they live, there could even be a security issue. If they live in a politically unstable country or an unsafe country, it could put their personal safety and the personal safety of their family at risk. Then you also have the issue of reporting. A lot of countries have, like the United States, for example, has significant reporting obligations when it comes to foreign income or assets. So now, how much of a favor have you really done to your heirs? Yes, they have a lot of money, but now they also have to pay more income taxes. They might have to pay more wealth taxes. They might either going to have a bigger estate subject to estate and inheritance taxes. They have increased risk of losing it in the case of a lawsuit or divorce. You may be putting them and their family at a security risk. They may be increasing their reporting obligations. That sounds like a pretty big burden to me. They're going to lose a lot of mobility. Maybe they need to leave the country that they're currently living in to go someplace that's more tax advantaged. But that might upset their family. Maybe their their spouse has a good job in that country. Maybe their kids have friends or are in school in that country. Now, every place that they want to move, they need to think about what the tax consequences are going to be. What are the risks of owning this wealth? It completely changes the lifestyle that they're used to, most likely, and significantly increases the risk of being targeted for fraud, their personal safety, their tax obligations, and all this stuff. A lot of times getting that much money, yeah, it's fantastic to have inherited a lot of money, but you're also placing a big burden on your heirs that unnecessarily, because this all could have been solved using a properly structured trust or foundation. Because using a properly structured trust or foundation is not only going to help you protect your assets and provide you with a solid estate plan during your lifetime, but it's also going to protect the assets for your heirs. It's going to provide tax advantages to your heirs, and it's going to solve the estate planning problems for your heirs in advance. You're not just leaving your legacy and your wealth to your heirs, but you're actually providing them freedom. You're leaving them the benefit of this wealth without all the burdens that can come along with it. Using a properly structured trust or foundation, far better than using a simple will. And here I'm going to explain why. Let's talk about you during your lifetime. If you put your assets into a properly structured trust or foundation, you no longer own the assets. One, if you get sued or you get divorced, your assets are going to be protected within this trust or foundation because you don't own them. If it's set up in a tax advantaged jurisdiction and you have a proper tax strategy behind it, you're probably going to save quite a bit of money on taxes. You also have privacy. People don't know that you own it because it now belongs to the trust or foundation. That also provides increased asset protection. It also takes care of your estate planning because normally if you have a multi-generational trust or foundation, the beneficiaries are probably you, your spouse, and your bloodline heirs, which means everybody, not just your kids, your grandkids, your grand-grandkids, grand-grand-grandkids, all the way down the line. Basically, anybody emanating from your bloodline is automatically going to become a beneficiary of this thing. And you have a proper management structure in place because a lot of times heirs are not prepared to receive that kind of wealth because maybe they're too young and they just haven't learned the skills yet to deal with wealth. Maybe they're irresponsible. Who knows? Having great wealth also comes with great responsibility. You need to know how to not only manage that wealth and preserve it, but you also need to know how to not become a victim of scams or investing in family members' harebrained schemes or business ideas. You really need to know your way and how to go through life with wealth, and that's an education. A lot of heirs don't have that for different reasons. Having it in a trust or foundation with a proper management structure in place and a proper succession plan for that management is not only going to ensure that wealth is managed properly within that trust or foundation long term, but it's also going to ensure it's managed over generations properly and that the beneficiaries are still taken care of in the form of distributions from management. Those are the benefits that you're going to get during your lifetime. You're taking care of your estate planning. You're putting a succession plan in place. You're providing yourself privacy because you no longer own the assets, and you also get the asset protection because you no longer own the asset. That's enough benefit for yourself to want to set up a trust or foundation during your lifetime, but you're also relieving your heirs of all the burdens that I just talked about. Because they're not going to be inheriting this wealth outright, whatever's in the trust or foundation, they're not going to be liable for tax on all the income generated within the foundation. They're only going to be liable for income tax on whatever distributions they get for the trust or foundation, depending on where they live, they might not even be subject to tax on the distributions that they receive from the trust or foundation. Now you've alleviated them of the burden of having to pay income tax on all the income generated by their inheritance. You're also providing them privacy. Because they don't own these assets, it's owned by the trust or foundation. Nobody knows that they have these assets or have the benefit of these assets. They're more likely not to be targeted, not having people approaching them with harebrained schemes, probably protecting their personal safety if they live in an unsafe place. You're also providing them and alleviating them of the burden of worrying about losing these assets because you've provided them with asset protection. Because they don't own the assets, the trust or foundation owns the asset. You've protected the assets for them. That means if they get sued, those assets are going to be unavailable to the creditor. If they get divorced, it's going to be unavailable to the spouse. That in and of itself is a huge benefit because if somebody inherits this wealth outright and they get married, they're going to want to get a prenup, which is an uncomfortable conversation a lot of times. Avoid that conversation if the assets are in a trust or foundation because the person doesn't own those assets. They'd also be unavailable to a spouse in the case of a divorce. Additionally, you've provided them with estate planning because they never own the assets. They're automatically going to benefit future generations who become beneficiaries of the trust or foundation. They don't need to worry about estate planning for these assets. Because the trust or foundation owns it, you've also alleviated them of the burden of estate and inheritance taxes when they die. And you've alleviated them of having to pay wealth taxes because they don't own these assets outright. They don't need to worry about how these assets are going to be managed in the future because you've put a succession of management plan in place. You're really giving your heirs much more of a gift when you leave them in inheritance in a trust or foundation. Don't burden them with outright ownership of this wealth because you're also giving them more freedom, which is a huge gift. If they own these assets outright, anytime they want to move to another country or spend a significant time in another country, they're always going to have to think of the tax consequences. Every time they meet a new person or a potential partner, they need to think of, are they after them for themselves or for the money? This wealth becomes a consideration in every single decision that they make. It plays a factor in where they want to live. And that's a huge burden to always have this on your mind, especially when you can have your cake and eat it too. They can still get all the benefits of this wealth if it's in a trust or foundation, without all the burdens that come with it. A lot of times I've noticed that the current generation, the generation that owns the wealth, is a little bit reluctant to start the planning process and just wants to do a will and forget about it, which I can understand. To do proper planning using a trust or foundation takes a lot of time and effort. You need to think through how you want the beneficiaries to benefit. You need to think through how management is going to work, how many people you want on the board. Do you want diversity of gender on the board? Do you want diversity of education on the board? What requirements do board members need to meet? How is succession and management going to work? All of this takes time, a lot of in-depth thought, and yeah, it costs money. And this is all, you're doing all of this for something that you're not going to get the benefit of. Your heirs are going to get the benefit of it. So this makes a lot of people who are in the current generation not want to engage in this process because it takes time, thought, money, and they're never going to see the benefit of it. It's all for the heir. But trust me, I've been doing this for over 25 years. Leaving assets outright through a will is really not doing anybody any favors when it comes to a significant amount of wealth. Structuring it through a properly structured trust or foundation alleviates all the burden of having wealth from the future generation, provides tax efficiency, asset protection, privacy, mobility, freedom from reporting obligations. It's just a much, much better structure. If you're interested in setting up a trust or foundation, that's exactly what I do. Feel free to contact us or contact me through our website at esquiregroup.com. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for joining me on Wealth Uncensored, where we help you minimize taxes and protect your wealth for the next generation. If you like our show, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. And if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at info@esquiregroup.com. And don't forget to visit Esquire Group's website for more information on how we can help you secure your wealth. I'll be dropping knowledge again next week. Don't forget to join us.